Hi, everyone. We should be live now. Hi, I'm here with Josh Wielgus from Chip Theory Games, and we're going to be talking about their game that's currently live right now called Burncycle. And Josh, welcome to
Thank you.
the TableTalk. Yeah, this is actually the first episode of our TableTalk now, because Vivo was running something before this, so this is like a transition to something new. So thanks for joining us here. Really appreciate it. I'm so glad that you could be on.
Absolutely, yeah, it's my pleasure. I did not know this was the inaugural episode, but I feel privileged to be helping to christen the show, so to speak. So
yeah, and there's like exciting things that you guys are doing over at Chip Theory Games. So I'm excited to be talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're excited about Burncycle. We're excited about what we've got coming in 2021 as well. So yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time to be working at Chip Theory, and it's a good time to be a Chip Theory fan over the course of this next year.
Perfect. Well, let's kind of get right into it, right? Like, we're here to talk about Burncycle. I'd love it for if you could tell us a little bit more about Burncycle and what the game's about.
Yeah, so in Burncycle, it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative stealth experience where you play as robots, and your goal is to basically the backstory of the game is that humans go extinct due to their own stupidity, their own hubris, and all that's left on Earth is robots. And robots, a few decades later, discover a way to bring humans back to life, much in the way that humans in Jurassic Park discovered a way to bring dinosaurs back to life. So the robots go ahead and do that. They bring the humans back to life, and they, humans promptly begin behaving like humans again and put the robots back into servitude and enact all these restrictions on their programming and so on and so forth. So you take the role of the robots in the game, and you are trying to infiltrate these big evil corporations and attempt to steal back pieces of code and kind of essentially get your AI back to gain control back for the robot race. So we're taking kind of the standard, the classic old trope of evil robot AI taking over humans and dominating humans and putting them into servitude. We're kind of flipping that on its head a little bit, and having the robots be the good guys, which it's been interesting to watch response to that. Like we've seen more than a couple comments like, I don't want to be a robot. Like, I want to be the evil domineering human. And we're kind of like, well, you get to kind of be that in every board game under the sun that you play. So we like the twist, and it's been fun to play with from a lore perspective. So yeah.
Absolutely. How did you all come up with this kind of idea of playing as a robot instead of the evil humans? Like, how did that all kind of come about?
I have to throw credit to our lead designer, Josh Carlson, who is also one of the co-owners of the company. This was his idea, and we like playing with we like playing with expectations and then putting a twist on them. Too Many Bones, our most popular game, doesn't have any magic in it, doesn't have any sorcery. It's a fantasy setting, but it's got these steampunk vibes, and you're playing as these plucky little gnome-like creatures instead of your traditional fantasy heroes. This is much the same in that regard. We really liked the idea of just you're not playing as robots against humans in any game. It's always the robots are evil, and we just like that subversive twist on everything. It goes to kind of the way that we do everything here, which is not how a lot of the rest of the board game industry is operating. We like to march to the beat of our own drummer, and that's just how we roll. So
yeah, I love hearing that. Like, doing something different, something novel is always going to be bring you like a group of really dedicated fans, and it's clear that Chip Theory Games has a very core group of very dedicated fans. Even you have that strategic level pledge where tell us more about that, actually.
So the strategist pledge level. So that's something that has been going on with our Kickstarters since all the way back to before I was involved with the company, when when Josh and Adam Carlson first started the company, they had a game idea. It was Hoplomachus, The Lost Cities. You can go back and see that campaign. I think we pulled in a whopping like 150 backers, and back that was before the board game boom on Kickstarter. So that was one of the very, very early board games that even showed up on Kickstarter. And you know, they were nobodies, like literal nobodies. They didn't have a company, they didn't have a brand, they didn't have any, they had very few, I should say, connections even in the board game industry. So they needed to get people's attention on Kickstarter. And so they came up with this idea, the strategist level pledge, where you pledge at, it was a high dollar amount back then, even I'd have to look at what it was, but $300 or $400, $500. You pledge at this level, you're going to get every game Chip Theory ever releases via Kickstarter. You're going to get a copy of the core game. You're just going to pay shipping, basically. So, you know, back then I say we, again, I wasn't even a part of the company, but back then Chip Theory needed that money. Like we needed these big infusions of cash, because all we had was one game to sell you, and that's it. So, those big, you know, $500, $600 level pledges like went a long way and helped get that initial game made. And now, now we don't. I don't say this in an arrogant sense, but we don't need those huge pledges from people. You know, we have enough of a following, we have enough of an established brand that most of our games are gonna fund without us like needing to sweat and panic over it too much. But the strategist level pledge has become a major tradition in Chip Theory, in the Chip Theory community and Chip Theory culture. And as our brand has evolved, we've become this premium experience board game company, which was also not really the case with Hoplomachus Lost Cities. We were just a company trying to get a game made with an idea. Now it's like, oh, a Chip Theory production, it's this big deal. And so that's made the strategist level pledge that much more amusing, because now that we continue to churn out, you know, $130 board games and that kind of thing, it becomes that much more valuable. So yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit about the backstory anyway.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, actually. Like, because you're onboarding these pretty much like super fans into your brand and the evolution of your publishing company as you keep going, and it grows with every single launch that you do. I'd love to kind of hear, like, from the back end of it, like what kind of happens with these like super fans? Do you have like special communications that go out? Like, what kind of like fun little perks are there?
Yeah, I mean, we try to do not just for strategists, but for all of our. I mean, I think we've taken a different approach again to Kickstarter than a lot of companies do, and we have put a tremendous amount of value in cultivating community across the board. I mean, from strategists to folks who help answer questions in the comments on our Kickstarters, to you know, we hide goofy little riddles in some of our games where if you manage to go online and solve them, we send you like physical promo cards for our games. We just like, we always try to just be in touch with our fans and do cool stuff for our fans that encourages them to continue to engage with us. So as it relates specifically to strategists, you know, that's we do send out a special newsletter to them, you know, once or twice a year, where they get a little bit of inside info. We've tried to, we're still building on that. We're small, and so like trying to do all these things with all these people is tough. But we found that by engaging with our existing fan base and really trying to cultivate a company that speaks to the things they're looking for, we've had really, really consistent success. And you know, as I mentioned, we don't go into a Kickstarter typically, you know, sweating and really, really afraid of how it's going to go. We know it's going to go at least this well, and if it catches fire and goes viral, maybe it'll go this well. But because we've spent so much energy engaging and cultivating that really passionate fan base, that's helped us know that we can succeed, and helped us establish a certain level of consistency across all of our releases, all of our Kickstarters, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's really great to hear. And you know, talking about just going to your fans and like building up this game, this, you know, the Burncycle. How are things different now in this like creation of the game because of COVID because of all this pandemic? How are you playtesting? How are you like designing? How are you kind of tweaking and making sure it all works? Like, how is it happening now?
Oh, that's such a complicated question. Yeah, I mean, it's just
I threw a lot at you at once.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, just point blank, it's hard. Everything is harder right now. My clock behind me is dying. I can see it on video. I mean, that's harder. No, everything's just hard. I mean, yeah, everything takes longer is really the biggest piece of it. We have, we still have a smattering of folks. I'm in my work office right now. We still have a smattering of folks that are here. We've been a little bit busier here in the office over the course of the Kickstarter just to film video and that kind of thing. But largely, the majority of Chip Theory employees are working from home and have been working from home since all of this hit in early spring. So it's really about just kind of planning for everything to take longer. We don't get a chance to sit in the same room and play test stuff together as often. So it's a lot of like throwing ideas all over the place together. And then, really it's been in this last month that we've brought all of these things we've been working on for Burncycle together. And, we've glued it all together, figuratively speaking, and we're seeing how it all runs. And we run games on Kickstarter earlier than a lot of other companies anyway. And that's a tradition that we kind of carry from those Hoplo Lost Cities days of, before everybody was launching almost complete, fully polished games on Kickstarter. Like, we were running ideas on Kickstarter. And we like to keep that tradition. That doesn't fly with everybody anymore, and that's okay. But I mean, the biggest difference is it just takes longer. It just takes longer. We're editing files electronically a lot more. We're doing a lot more work in spreadsheets earlier in the game design process rather than out on a table. And from an external playtesting standpoint, we haven't really begun external playtesting Burncycle yet, but with our previous campaign for Cloudspire and Cloudspire expansions, it really just a lot more online print and play, that kind of thing. And everything, the feedback takes longer to get, the editing process takes longer to complete. The actual manufacturing of board games is taking longer and longer right now overseas because other countries and other factories and that kind of thing are short-staffed. Transit is taking longer. There's backups in the ports in the UK. There's less containers. There's less ships crossing the ocean right now than there were pre-COVID, which means that shipping costs more typically, and it will take longer because the ships aren't leaving port as often. I mean, everything. COVID's really that's the biggest thing. It's made everything cost a little bit more, and it's made everything take a little bit to a lot of bit longer. And that's just a reality that we're living in. So
no, I love that we're talking about this more of like the backside of building up a game and making a game, because a lot of people who are backers, they don't really know what kind of things to expect. They just see something on Kickstarter and they're like, okay, if I back it, I'm gonna get it, right? But from your end, there's all these different things that have changed, even with just like after 11 games, right? The expenses, the time, just like the way you communicate, just to design the game itself. Like, has the way you kind of gauge how something is fun or working kind of changed in this kind of digital environment, longer term environment kind of playtesting phase?
I don't think so. We have always been a very insular company, in that historically we haven't even done a whole lot of external playtesting. So we play things inside the office a lot, and my gauge for how fun something is has always kind of been like, okay, how fast is time passing? How often am I wanting to check my phone? How am I counting down the hours until this ends, or am I completely like immersed in this experience? And that all of that has remained much the same. I think certainly the next few projects we have coming out are all cooperative experiences that can be played solo. So that has certainly been a conscious business decision that we've made. In terms of people can't get together to play board games together nearly as easily right now. So some of those types of things, are all factoring. But yeah, in terms of what makes a game great and what makes it fun, that's remained much the same. Like I said, it's just taking that whole process of getting to that point of knowing it's fun is just taking a lot longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Shannon just dropped by too, that if someone wants to play test, they can actually email Shannon and get on a list of folks who can get, the playtesting application. It's awesome.
Yeah, certainly. And we have this has been really limited release thus far, but we do have a TTS mod. I guess that's one way that playtesting is changing just in general. And I don't know if COVID has caused it or if COVID has merely accelerated it. But a year or two ago, we never would have dreamed of focusing on having somebody create a TTS mod for any game we were working on. And now that is, it's becoming basically, par for the course. If you don't have that, you're going to be behind the 8 ball a little bit. So everything from working with content creators to playtesting, that has become a really more. Yeah, it's become really more. It's become a much more important part of the process. And so shout out to the Chip Theory community for helping us put that together, because that's brand new. Mark Buxton is one of our fans who has helped us build the TTS version of Burncycle that we've been showing content creators, and
nice.
Without that, right now I think we'd be in a little bit of a tight spot. So yeah. So let's kind of pivot and just talk really more deeply about
Burncycle here. Let me pull up the page so that we kind of go through it. So with Burncycle here, there's a lot of incredible components that you have laid out here clearly as a picture. Would love to if you kind of went through a little bit about what people can expect in this box and what people have to look forward to, pretty much.
Yeah, man. So the thing we always lead with at Chip Theory is components, and I sometimes feel a little bit pigeonholed by that, because I think there's a lot of people that think we use fancy components to hide shallow gameplay. There are people out there that feel that way, and I think ultimately they've maybe just never really sat down to play one of our games. But but I do always lead with that, just because people look at the price tag and they're like, holy cow, how on earth can you charge that? But so what do you have to look forward to in Burncycle? It's a cooperative game, solo and cooperative game, where you're going to take the role of a little robot, and all these robots, they have asymmetrical abilities, and you're going to be sneaking through 3 floors of a corporation. There's 3 corporations in the base game. They each have unique mechanics that are trying to shut you down as a robot. They each have unique rooms and floor designs that you're going to be kind of infiltrating and navigating, and then they each have a separate deck of objective cards. And the variety in the game really comes from the combination of the corporation you're trying to infiltrate, the unique abilities of your robots, and then the objectives that you draw in any given game. You can look at for content creators for this campaign, we've thrown out a single floor is what most folks are playing through, or 2 floors, with the same robots and the same control module, which is another mechanic I can touch on, and the same corporation, and all of their playthroughs have gone wildly different, and which is what we love about it. We're showing a very, very, very small chunk of the game, and these playthroughs are going in a variety of interesting directions. So we're not interested in creating a game that can really be solved. We want there to be a ton of different factors, playing into the game, so that it's very replayable. But it's a big box game. If you've ever looked at Too Many Bones or Cloudspire from Chip Theory, there's a ton of neoprene in the box, a ton of dice. We've got modular neoprene in this game, so you have a big base neoprene mat that works as your kind of your building, and then you layer the rooms of the corporation on top of that with modular neoprene rooms. Ultimately what we've looked at is Too Many Bones is phenomenally popular. Cloudspire's audience is growing, and it's beginning to really take off in terms of notoriety and finding the people that really love it. But those games are very, very, very dense. They're very, very long teaches. They're very, very asymmetrical in terms of, to the point that you'd want to, if you're coming to game night to play Too Many Bones, or you're coming to game night to play Cloudspire, you would want to take a look at your, character reference card and faction reference card probably the night before, and like really learn how that's going to work. And that doesn't make it a great game to, just bust out on game night with people who are unfamiliar with it. So with Burncycle, we've tried to take a lot of the best elements of Too Many Bones, the best elements of Cloudspire in terms of asymmetry, in terms of unique powers, in terms of lots of fun dice to roll, lots of crunchy decisions to make. And we've tried to, package it in such a way that this is going to be, it's not necessarily a lighter game, but it's a much easier teach. You can wrap your head around it much more quickly, and it'll still provide a lot of the same things you love about those other games, but maybe you can play them with a group that isn't quite looking for a 3 to 4 hour cooperative RPG experience. They're looking for a game that can be played in a couple hours and then put away. So I don't know. There's so much going on in the game. It's hard to know exactly what to talk about, but that's a little bit about where we're going with it.
We have actually one question from our audience member here. The question is, how do you plan to develop the network part of the game?
Yeah. So that's been a common refrain from both content creators who have had a chance to play the game and from backers. So I appreciate that question, Valerio. So again, the one thing I want to just emphasize over and over again, and this feels like a cop out, but we do put games on Kickstarter early. Like we are not claiming this game is done. We know we have a lot more to do on this game. And I would certainly echo the feedback that the network is probably the biggest part. So right now, if you're not familiar with the game, the network is a separate mat that sits outside of the building mat and has what I would describe as more abstract gameplay going on. It represents, the internet network or security network of the corporation you're infiltrating, and it actually operates, I realized, a little bit like the children's game Hoot Owl Hoot, which probably just turned off anyone who was considering backing Burncycle. But there are some similar mechanics going on there. What we're realizing is that right now in the game, it's a little bit too punitive to get on the network. There's not enough hooks into the building in terms of like, oh, this will help me unlock a door, or this will help me unlock new dice to roll, or this will help do X, Y, and Z. It really kind of exists as its own separate mini game, and we're very aware of that, and we want to change that. So Valeria, to answer your question directly, we're already in the background. We have to let things sit for the campaign because the campaign has to be the campaign. But as soon as we get done running this Kickstarter, we're going to be jumping into ways to really tie it to the building a lot more, to make it more fun to engage with, to provide a lot more benefits for the player, to emphasize them getting into the network. Right now, we knew we needed something, because it's a stealth game, we need to give you something to do when guards are like walking on their guard routes, things along those lines. So that's why the network exists how it does. But we absolutely agree that we need to create some more engagement around that, and I can promise you that we're aware of it and we're going to address it. Exactly how that looks, until we get a chance to play test some more things on it, we won't exactly know. But yeah, we're definitely looking at that. So it's a good question. Yeah.
So from like a Kickstarter perspective, right? Like now you mentioned that Chip Theory games, you launch games at like an earlier phase than a lot of other publishers do. Like how do you typically approach running Kickstarters, and how do backers have that kind of window into what you're doing and after the campaign too, to kind of help with the final product? Can you kind of talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we read every comment, which I don't recommend to everyone. I don't recommend.
There's thousands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We read every single one. We try to respond to as absolutely many as we can, and we do internalize that feedback. So I mean, not all feedback is of the same quality as other types of feedback and that kind of thing. But I think we've set ourselves apart in the industry, for better or for worse, in that we do really, really listen to backers, and we try to provide them with things that we think are customer friendly, with reacting to feedback if they hate the color of something, or they think something's ugly, or they think the artwork sucks, or like whatever. Like, we react and we adjust, and I don't think a lot of other companies are in a position to do that. Now, again, there's drawbacks. There's, we've seen a flood of people coming and commenting on the Kickstarter like, hey, this looks unfinished, this looks like it's a work in progress, and we're like, yep,
it is a work in progress.
But on the other hand, it gives us a chance to, rather than reacting to the opinions of 5 to 10 playtesters that get a chance to take an early look before we print like full-on prototypes, it gives us a chance to show this to thousands of people and get their feedback and say like, hey, we don't think the network part of the game looks finished enough and it doesn't look that cool. And that gives us a chance to be like, okay, we were feeling a little bit that way as well, but this is like absolute confirmation of that. We've heard from backers that we have 4 dice in the game in the prototype that are currently standard, just pip dice instead of the fancy custom dice that we usually do. I've seen a bunch of comments today that have been saying like, those are so ugly, like we don't want pip dice, like give us custom dice. And we're like, great, like we were planning on that anyway, but that confirms our instinct that like, okay, we can do it that way. They get to give us feedback on sculpts for various 3D things in the game. They get to give us UX feedback and give us feedback on reference sheets sometimes, all those types of things. And we take that in stride. We think that's the beauty of Kickstarter. I'm fairly certain at this point, if we just put stuff up for pre-order on our website, we could get pretty good traction. I don't know that we would need Kickstarter to make a game viable anymore. But at the same time, to us, that also like defeats the purpose of Kickstarter altogether. Like, Kickstarter provides us, in our view, with the opportunity to engage with the community in a meaningful way and make sure that we make a product that they are excited to show off on game night and that they feel like they had a voice in. And if we had come to Kickstarter with Burncycle fully finished, ready to go, we may have seen better sales numbers on it, and that's cool. But again, like, that's, to us, that's not what Kickstarter is about. And again, that seems to be becoming a more unique approach with each passing year as the competition on Kickstarter cranks up and that kind of thing. And I don't know if it'll always be the right business decision for us or not, but for now, we're that's our story, and we're sticking to it. So
I love it. So I have a marketing background, and I love what you guys are doing at Chip Theory, because like, essentially products aren't, you don't just make a product and just kind of like spend a bunch of ads on it and hope it sells now, right? Now, the new way to make a product is to really make it, like, get some feedback, see what people like, see what people don't like, and kind of make those iterations so you're able to bring in your fans and like take them on the journey too. And it seems like you're spot on with doing that. Is keeping true to that nature of Kickstarter for sure.
Yeah. And I will say too, I mean, there's some smoke and mirrors involved with Kickstarter across the industry. And I don't say that to disparage any other company, but like, just as an example, Burncycle is much further along than Cloudspire was when we launched Cloudspire on Kickstarter. It may not, it may not appear that way, but I can tell you with confidence that is the case. Cloudspire was on Kickstarter at the exact same time as Tidal Blades, and we and again, I'm not bringing this up to. I did an interview with James Hudson a couple days ago. He's great. The folks over at Skybound are great, and Druid City, but at the time, there was all these comparisons between, like, look at how, Cloudspire, they're telling, it's a big nothing burger. They're telling us nothing about the game. And then look at Tidal Blades. It's like done, ready to go. Well, we delivered Cloudspire a year ago and are getting ready to deliver the reprint Kickstarter with expansion content. And Tidal Blades is fulfilling, like, right now, 2 years later. And, again, you look at the Kickstarters for the two, one looked like it had just started being developed, and one looked like it was finished, and it's just not the case. Like, games take as much time as they need, and part of running a Kickstarter is creating the impression that a product is maybe further along than it actually is. And we just, like, I mean, to put it bluntly, we don't like playing that game with people. Like, we're, it's here as what it is. This is how far we are on it right now. We think it has a really, really good opportunity of being our next huge hit. And I think, get it on the Kickstarter or don't. It's not a huge deal to us. But like when this product's done, we fully believe it's going to be our next big hit series. We're that confident in it, and we're that excited about it. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. We actually had another question come in about the game itself. So let's bring it up here. So how does the game scale with 3 to 4 players? They were saying that Christian saying that Matt looks quite small and crowded for 2 players. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, so the mat size is something that we've done a lot of testing with. The game started with a much larger mat, much larger mat, to the point that we were actually looking at doing much smaller chips in the game so that we could kind of keep the mat, keep the scale of the mat really, really large, but but not have it take up so much physical space via on your table. It does get crowded with 4 player, and that is fully intentional. Coordinating your movement and working as a team in Burncycle is a huge, huge, huge part of the game. Yeah. And you're never going to be dealing with all that many guards, but in 4 player, you're at a much higher risk of being spotted because there's, hiding spots are being taken up by other players. You can't move through other players, at least now in this iteration of the game. That may change if it becomes a little bit too restricting, but you can't move through other players and you can't move through guards. Yeah. So being able to draw a guard over, to another part of the building via distracting them or being intentionally seen, that kind of thing, becomes a much bigger piece of the game than it does in 2 player. In 2 player, it's you have a limited amount of people who can complete objectives, but you're at a very reduced threat of being seen and that kind of thing. So right now it scales up pretty nicely. It is cramped though. I will absolutely tell you that. And it's not easy to pull off a 4 player heist. One of the biggest criticisms of Too Many Bones tends to be actually that it's too easy at 4 players, which not everybody feels that way, but I do hear that fairly often. Like when you get four characters out there on the map with all their skills and everything, they become much more powerful because of all the synergy you can create. That is still that, we wanted to move away a little bit from that with Burncycle and make it a really stiff challenge with 4 players. And I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. And that's not to say that the size of the mat is absolutely final and that we may not make adjustments to that end. But that is to answer your question, Christian, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Well, this is another reason to kind of back the campaign on Kickstarter too, right? You get to have this say early on into the process of actually bringing out Burncycle. So, now that we're talking about, talking through these questions that people are kind of sending in, if you have any more questions, feel free to send them in too. We'll be chatting with Josh about it. One of the questions that I get a lot when I work with a lot of game designers is that how do you kind of balance people's input with what ultimately happens in the game, and also kind of big picture from that? Like what kind of challenges or obstacles do you personally face too when designing games?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, I think for us, our biggest challenge as a company tends to be, and I think several of the folks like Shannon, who's in the comments and works with a lot of this stuff. A lot of people would laugh in our office when we say this, but scope creep is a huge thing for us here in this office. We're like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if we threw this in and we threw this in and we threw this in, and and there becomes a point, and I think we tiptoed. I think we tiptoed right up to that line in Cloudspire. There becomes a point where it's just too much. It makes the game like not streamlined, and it does create balance issues and that kind of thing. But like we as a company, with our production ethos and with our just sort of indie vibe, where we're not beholden really to any anybody who's watching the exact numbers on our profit margins and that kind of thing, in the same way that maybe the bigger companies take a look at that kind of stuff. Like scope creep, this is the big thing for us, where we're just like at some point we have to stop putting things into the game. But in terms of balance, that's just a tricky one. I mean, it's so much of it is just intuition. A lot of it goes back to sometimes people will suggest things that we already tried very, very early in the design process. I think a lot of people don't realize how many small iterations have already happened before a game will make its way out to the public, and lots and lots and lots of things get tried, and lots of things get tried and are terrible and get pulled or don't quite work for one reason or another. There's always more than one. There's always more than one way around a problem, but sometimes there's just a better way around a problem. And so even if something's not quite perfect, or because every game's got one or two things that are a little bit clunky, if they're big complicated games, and some problems just can't be solved maybe as elegantly as we would like. So I don't know, it's a balance and it's intuition, and I'm also not here to sit down and say we always get it right. In the last year we brought in Chip Theory fans know this already, but we brought in Andrew Navarro, who is the former head of studio at Fantasy Flight Games.
Wow,
and it's always a fancy big name drop when we get to drop FFG's name. But
I'm just casually putting it there.
Yeah. We poached somebody from FFG. No, he's really one thing that his though experience at FFG, his years of experience at FFG is really helping us learn is how important a lot of the user experience stuff is in the printed materials. He's a graphic designer by nature, and has been through the entire kind of recent arc of the modern board game boom from all the way back in the early 2000s to now. And so he's helping us with a lot of that elegant stuff. He's helping us learn where we can use an icon instead of a big long sentence and that kind of thing, or a keyword and that kind of stuff. So but at the end of the day, it really is, it's just intuition, and you get better at it, or I'd like to think we're getting better at it as we go with each passing game. You learn a little bit more from what worked in the last game or what failed epically in the last game. You learn from playing other games. You learn from what works in other games and what was really elegant or what felt clunky, that kind of thing. And then balance in terms of competitive balance or difficulty balance, all that kind of stuff. Some of that's personal preference in co-op games. We tend to tune our games to be very, very difficult. Whereas, other people just like to win all the time or make it a little bit easier to win, that kind of thing. And some of it is just literal math. We have tons of spreadsheets that we do development in, and it's okay, we're just going to average these values out so that we know mathematically this is balanced. And then there's a whole other piece of it that is just feeling, what feels balanced. Even if something is balanced but doesn't feel balanced when you're playing it, even though you could go back and prove with a mathematical proof, it's not going to be fun for the player. I had a long conversation, Adam Carlson, one of the co-owners, and Manny Tremblay, who worked a lot on, or is working a lot on Dice Throne. We had a long conversation with him about balance in Dice Throne, and how balanced are these characters? Are they mathematically balanced? And he was saying that Nate, who is the other half of the Dice Throne design team, is all about the math, and Manny is all about the feel, and they often get into disagreements with each other. So again, like I said, it's a really, really long way to say intuition at the end of the day, but math and intuition is kind of where things go. So and the players are usually right. I will also just say that designers have big ideas in their head about what something is supposed to look like, but at the end of the day, if it's unplayable or not clear to the player, it doesn't matter what we thought in our head. The player's right. So yeah.
Well, I guess this leads to my next question. What about the game, Burncycle? Are you I'm so glad we did that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And
we can scroll to whatever part on the page.
Yes. Man, I think it's a basic mechanic in the game, but we fairly late actually. We're talking in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So the game operates on a mechanic of basically you're drawing chips out of a bag that have icons on them, and that controls it doesn't control exactly what you can do on your turn, but if you follow the actions that are drawn for you, you get a bonus for each action. So, for example, one of the icons is physical actions. If you perform a physical action when your tracker is on the physical token, you're going to get a bonus. You're going to get to move a little bit further, for example. So that mechanic evolved a bunch over the course of development. This started as more of a programming game where we were saying, like, you're going to draw these icons and you're going to order them in the way that you want to order them. And then you're going to perform that exact step of actions. Classic programming mechanic. And that's how it started. Then we were like, okay, this is creating a ton of like analysis paralysis at the beginning, and nobody, it's a cooperative game, and none of us are agreeing on how we should order these icons. And there's going to be, one quarterback who's like, no, this is how we order them, and everybody shut up, like, this is how we're doing it, et cetera, et cetera. So it changed to, okay, now these are randomly drawn, placed into the Burncycle, and you get a bonus if you follow it, or you can do whatever you want on any of these icons, but you're going to be less efficient at whatever you're trying to do. In the same way, then, what was happening is then every 3 rounds, so every player at the table would take a turn, and that was a round. So every 3 rounds, then we would reboot the Burncycle, is what we call it in the game. You take all those icons out, you throw them back into the bag, and you redraw. But we were finding that, spending time tracking rounds that way, 3 rounds was like completely arbitrary. It was nothing but a balancing mechanic to like allow you to get a fresh set of icons in the game. Tracking 3 rounds was really, really a pain and really arbitrary and just kind of like didn't make any sense. And so that's where now what happens is at the end of each round, we freeze 1 icon. And so that after enough rounds, you have less and less icons to work with, and you're going to want to choose to reboot the Burncycle yourself. Rebooting the Burncycle increases the threat in the game, which makes life harder for you and more miserable for you. So you have this. By giving the players a choice of when to reboot, we gave more power to the players. But then we also eliminated the requirement to track how many rounds you're going, and it just made everything more smooth, more elegant, and I'm really, really glad that we did things that way. That was a fairly late addition to the game.
You mentioned a few weeks ago.
We also we're notorious for tracking health in our games with health chips stacked underneath your character chip, and we fairly late in the development process also switched that to be tracked by your basic action dice in the game, also represents your health. You're always able to cash in your basic action dice to upgrade to like more reliable dice and that kind of thing, unlock new abilities for your character, all that kind of stuff. But what we found early on is that, well, everybody is just spending their experience points to unlock new action dice. Like that was always just the go-to.
That was the thing.
Right. Like that's the smartest path. So we were like, okay, well, what if we lean into that, and we just say like, well, of course, your experience is going to be your basic action dice. So experience now just is action dice. You get new action dice to spend, and that's what you get. And then you're cashing those in for additional abilities, and we cap the amount that you have per your character. So the big beefy tank bot in the game can have up to 7 action dice. The other characters have more of a restriction, and they are being forced to cash them in for other abilities once they hit their max. That created more choice in the game. That made it so that players have to choose between health and skills and abilities and upgrades. It also eliminated putting 65 health chips in the box, which is like way more elegant just in general, and saves on environmental waste, allowed us to get the cost of the game down a little bit, that kind of thing. Those are two kind of things that evolved even just recently that we feel like we've come up with a lot cleaner systems for, and have made the game, I think, much, much better and much more compelling. And that's just in the last couple weeks. So that's the kind of stuff that we're excited to get this back to the table after the Kickstarter campaign, to start working out all of those smoothness kinks and start layering on all that polish that we tend to be known for in our final products.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few questions actually came in too. So it's like tackle these two and then move forward
Yeah.
here. Yeah. So how do you thought about making a tray?
Yeah, to put cards in during game. Yes. Yeah. So I will say like the whole like box blister insert for the game, all that kind of stuff, how stuff is packaged, that's all none of that has been finalized or really talked about yet. We typically, you know, go to pretty far lengths to make a game as like beautiful on the table and intuitive on the table as we can. So yes, thought has been put into that, Jim. I can't promise you that it's going to happen because we're gonna look at what the best way to do things are, but we whether it's something that we include in the box or whether it's a accessory, that kind of thing. We have in the past, we've sold like chip tray holders that also have card slots in them, mostly for Too Many Bones. We discontinued those because they weren't a huge seller, but we certainly still have that design on hand, and we'll look at all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And another question from Christian here.
Yeah, how do you go about balancing difficulty, variability, ensuring the game can't be stalled, and still pressuring players? So this is our first game with a built-in kind of timer mechanism, and that is the threat meter. And you know, certainly a piece of that is making sure that most of the objectives in the game are of a similar difficulty to pull off. And so I mentioned objectives relate specifically to a specific corporation. So regardless of whether you're drawing that objective on floor 1 or floor 2, you know, we know what the building layout's going to be. We know roughly what you're going to be engaging with in terms of what that corporation is throwing at you. So that allows us to balance objectives, you know, I think pretty well. But the random nature of it might mean that Nero's drawing 2, choosing 1. So you may choose a bad objective, or you may choose an objective that appears very simple at first glance, but is actually really difficult. And actually, Josh Carlson and I, when we filmed a gameplay video that went really badly for us, and we didn't end up even like posting it publicly because we had some sound issues, but like we took an objective, we were like, oh, that'll be easy, that's no problem, and then it ended up turning into a complete bleep show. So anyway, like we can look at the map, layouts because they're mostly static. And we can determine pretty quickly, like, oh, that's going to be really tough, or that's going to be really difficult. Or we can say, oftentimes what we can look at is like, okay, if you draw this early, that's awesome. That's good for you, and this would be a good draw, and you want to keep this one. But if you draw it later and you try to accomplish it, it's going to be bad. And that just speaks to like familiarity with the game. And we want there to be a skill curve in this game. We want you to be able to get good at it. We don't want you to but none of this is solvable, and we have a lot of difficulty knobs that we can turn in terms of higher difficulty levels too, that we can make sure that players don't ever solve this game. It's and the different bot makeups that you can, you know, the party that you bring to any corporation, some of them are going to make the game way harder for certain corporations than others. You know, as an example, one of the companies is an energy company, and thematically speaking, they're dumping human toxic fumes and chemicals and that kind of thing into robot zones, and that's how they're oppressing the robots. They have a lot of stuff that's going to hurt you in terms of your durability. There are some corporations where like you're never really going to be at threat of dying, so to speak, in the game. You don't die in this game, you get disabled, but you're not, you know, to the corporations, that's not really like a huge part of the tension in the game. It's more about the threat meter getting all the way to the bottom, and then you just lose the game if the threat gets too high. With the company, they're throwing like actual damage stuff at you, and like durability becomes an issue. So if you take really weak bots into that corporation, as an example, it's going to be tougher for you than if you bring in a party composition that's tougher. So, you know, you might solve it. You might be able to win pretty consistently if you bring really heavy duty, high health bots into the game. But if you want to challenge yourself, then bring some guys that are a little bit weaker and present some more questions. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, you know, that you went really into detail about that, and I hope it really clarifies all these questions that people are having. So I guess before we kind of wrap things up here, I wanted to ask, is there anything else about the game that you wanted to bring up or wanted to kind of bring to the table today?
Nothing like super specific. I think this game is doing something again, with kind of programming mechanics and that kind of thing that has not been done before in other board games. And then, you get that chip theory production value. We don't do Kickstarter exclusives. I'm not here to beg for your pledge. You can back at the $5 level, and you'll have access to everything that everybody else has during the campaign. But you're going to help make something that I think is going to be absolutely phenomenal when it's all said and done. And you're going to end up with a game that you're excited to show off at game night. We know times are tough for people, though. I mean, again, this is our first new IP that we've launched in a global pandemic. Hopefully the last. And, we know we're coming up on the holidays and that kind of thing, but this game is going to be awesome. If you miss out on the campaign, you'll be able to late pledge. If you're not confident in it yet, wait till it releases. It'll be available on our website. I don't know. We're really excited about it. Having been through, a few different launches here of new IPs and new games and new game systems and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is the one I've been most excited about coming to Kickstarter with. I think this game has legs. I think it's going to be a big hit for us. And thanks for checking it out, regardless of whether you choose to back it or not. We're super excited about it.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on to talk with us today. And everyone, go check out Burncycle on Kickstarter. And you can get in and be able to communicate with Josh and the team pretty much every day in the comments and get updates every single day too throughout the duration of the campaign.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you. See you, everybody.